Good evening. Welcome to St. Peter's in Hove, and welcome again to another step on our journey through St. Mark's Passion account. Today we meet a new character, and a rather surprising character from the point of view of the Gospels, because we're told an awful lot about him, though he only actually has one verse dedicated to him. Now, they enlisted a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, father of Alexander and Rufus, who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. Well, first of all, we're told his name. He's called Simon. In those days, people didn't have surnames. He's Simon from Cyrene. Simon, a Jewish name, so he's a Jewish man, and he comes from Cyrene. Cyrene is now part of Libya, so he lived a long way away from the land of Judah. In those days, even in the time of Jesus, the majority of Jewish people lived outside the Holy Land. In fact, the largest Jewish community in the world in those days was Alexandria, and even places like Rome had large Jewish communities. And so there were huge Jewish communities as well in Mesopotamia and in Persia. Alexandria was really the center of the Jewish world. So this Simon of Cyrene was a Jew whose family perhaps had been settled outside the land of Israel for many generations. He has two sons, one called Rufus, one called Alexander. Alexander is, of course, a Greek name. So we assume that Simon is a sort of a Hellenized Jew. Don't forget Jesus' disciples. Some of them had Greek names as well, such as Philip. Philip is a Greek. Philip means, does it not mean tamer of horses? Yes, it does, doesn't it? Or no, lover of horses is what Philip means. Very odd name for Saint Philip, isn't it? His other son, Alexander, means leader of men, by the way, which of course is my name, I believe. The other son's called Rufus, which of course is a Latin name. Rufus means the red-headed, so his real name was probably something else. And he was just known as Rufus, just like our king, William II, is known as William Rufus, real name William, but known as Rufus. But again, this was quite common in ancient times for people to be known by a nickname. And so therefore the Roman Emperor Gaius is never called that. We always call him Caligula, which was his nickname. Now, we know rather a lot about this man. He was enlisted to carry the cross. We know why, because presumably Jesus, because of his terrible sufferings, was in danger of death, and he was too weak to carry his own cross. Therefore, Simon of Cyrene was enlisted. Now, this word enlisted sounds quite polite. It literally means to put on a list. No, actually, he was shanghaied into carrying the cross. Nobody would want to carry a cross. Nobody would dream of carrying a criminal's cross on their way to execution if they could possibly help it. So in other words, Simon was forced by the Romans. He was probably a big, strong man. He was forced by the Romans to carry the cross. He did not volunteer. He was not asked his consent. It must have been a terrible shock to him. Don't forget, he was coming in from the country. Well, he's coming in from Cyrene, wasn't he? He was a Jew coming from Cyrene, coming into Jerusalem for the Passover holiday. Possibly he was a man who'd never been to Jerusalem before in his life. This was a lifetime's ambition to hold the Passover that year in Jerusalem. He walks into Jerusalem just as Jesus is being marched to execution, as leaving the city. This chance encounter means that his Passover holiday is effectively ruined. This chance encounter, though, means something else. It means an encounter with the Saviour. He sees before him a condemned criminal, a man who suffered appallingly. This must make a terrible, terrible impression on him. It must, in fact, be quite traumatic to see a man who is about to die, and to die so horrifically. And when he goes away after he's carried the cross for Jesus, and he scuttles away from Golgotha, maybe he goes and hides, maybe he goes to try and forget, but he cannot forget. And indeed, there is evidence to believe that he did not forget at all, but rather he pondered over his experience and eventually understood it, and was baptized and became a Christian. And that his sons, Alexander and Rufus, were members of the early church. In particular, Alexander seems to have been a member of the church in Rome. Now, that's quite possible that Alexander, living in Cyrene, he had emigrated to Rome and then was living in Rome where the Gospel of Mark was written. We know he was living in Rome, or somebody called Alexander was living in Rome, because there's an Alexander mentioned in the letter of St. Paul to the Romans, where the long section where St. Paul is sending his regards to various people. So maybe Alexander of Cyrene, son of Simon, became a leading member of the early church. And as he was reading St. Mark's Gospel, he would have been one of the earlier readers, said, "Oh, yeah, it was really great. That guy, Mark, he mentioned me in his book, you know." People nowadays do like it when you mention them in your book, don't they? And similarly, St. Mark is name checking, as we call it nowadays, Alexander and Rufus. But there's something much more important here. The encounter that Simon had was a dreadful, traumatic encounter, but one which led to salvation and to faith. So, in this one verse, St. Mark has summed up his entire gospel. Meet the suffering Christ, find salvation. That's enough for this evening. See you tomorrow. Bye.